Hey, welcome to House Church, man. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad I get to be a part of this moment and this time with you today as we keep rolling in this series, Extraordinary, where we've been talking about just ordinary people, ordinary moments that God uses in extraordinary ways. We're going to look at the person Andrew. Andrew is really one of my favorite personalities, one of my favorite people in all of Scripture, because Andrew is a guy that is largely unknown. He's not talked about a whole lot. We don't know a whole lot about him. He's never really the main character in any story, but he's always kind of there showing up, being used by God. It's a story, it's a guy, it's a personality that, man, just my personality type. Like I resonate with it. I like Andrew's story, not necessarily striving for anything, but being ready to be used anytime. And so we're going to look at three different passages, all in the Gospel of John, that all talk about Andrew in some way. I'll reference Andrew. Again, never really the main character of the story, but he plays a part in what some might say an ordinary part that has extraordinary results. We're not going to read all of them. We'll give you the references so you can read them tonight as a house church. But where I want you to start is John chapter 1, verse 35. Gospel of John chapter 1, verse 35, we see for the first time Andrew and his brother Peter. And really, that's what stands out in this story, is that how Andrew is known is because his brother is known. Everybody knows his brother. Everybody wants to be his brother. Everybody wants to be around his brother. Andrew's just a little guy in the room. He's just a little brother that's kind of tagging along. Every time that Andrew's name is mentioned, except one at the end of the gospel, Andrew's name is always mentioned the same way. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. So as we roll through Andrew's story, what you're going to see is three pitfalls, and we can talk about three principles along the way to live out our purpose. And the first pitfall is comparison. It's so easy for Andrew to fall into the comparison trap of his brother. Right? That's what everybody else was comparing him to. How could he not? How can we not compare ourselves to the people on social media, to the people that we see out of Hollywood, the people that our culture highlights and talks so much about winning and being successful? How do we not compare ourselves to that and this idea that, man, I don't have the money, or I don't have the education, or I don't have the background, or I don't have the influence, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. It's so easy to get lost in that comparison trap. But one of the things we're reminded of in Andrew's story is the push back against that comparison is to remember that man, God uses who we are not. And what I mean by that is in what we might consider our weaknesses, in our struggles, in our challenges, that's exactly where we'll find God's strength. You know, if I don't have the education or the money, well, good, I won't rely on that. I'll rely on God's strength. Well, if I don't have the boldness, if I don't have the courage, well, good, I won't rely on that. I'll rely on God's strength. And we see Andrew not relying on anything other than God's strength and God's movement and God's power in his life. The other place we see Andrew in this gospel is in chapter 6. It's a miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. Maybe you've heard that story. It's a pretty popular one, right? Where Jesus takes a couple of pieces of bread and a couple of pieces of fish, and he multiplies that offering. That's what it is. It's an offering. He multiplies that offering, and he uses it to feed thousands of people, and then takes leftovers up. See, in that story, one of the things that John tells us, a detail that he adds, is that it's Andrew, the insignificant apostle. It's Andrew that brings this little boy with this lunch to Jesus. And he says, here's a couple of pieces of bread, here's a couple of pieces of fish. And Andrew even says, and I love this question, he says, what are these for so many? I don't know what you can do, but I know that you can do. And so here's what I got to offer. See, another pitfall we have to be careful of not falling into is doubt. Because that question, right? What are these for so many? Well, who am I for all of this problem? Who am I for all of this pain? What do I have to offer? You see, that can be what doubt sounds like, but it can also be what faith sounds like. And it all depends on what we do with it. You see, had Andrew said, well, I don't know what these are for so many, I'm not even going to take them to Jesus. That's doubt. And that's where doubt destroys our purpose. But doubt didn't stop the action. Doubt didn't stop the decision. Andrew said, I don't know what these are for so many, but I'm going to bring them to Jesus because he can do something. And that's faith. See, when I say, I don't know how I can help my friend, so I'm just not going to, let's doubt. When I say, I don't know how I can help my friend, but I'm at least going to pray for him. I'm at least going to invite him over for dinner. Well, now we begin to move into faith. And doubt is where we settle for the mundane instead of experiencing the miraculous. So how do we do that? How do we let our doubt move into a place of faith? Well, here's the second principle. Talk to yourself. Don't listen to yourself. And what I mean by that is, our thoughts are powerful. And our thoughts are always there. And if we're not careful, our thoughts will drift into a very negative place. And it's not necessarily because you're a negative person. It's because we live in a fallen and broken world. And so naturally, our thoughts are going to drift to what is fallen, what is broken. That's why Scripture tells us to take every thought captive. That's why it tells us to be transformed by the renewal of our mind. It's why it tells us to be intentional about thinking on, dwelling on the things of God, what is good, pure, holy, and right. Right? We have to fight back. And the way we do that is not just by listening to our thoughts, but by intentionally talking to ourselves. Even when you don't feel it, read Scripture, read the promises of God. Even when you're feeling down, man, start a gratitude journal. Take just a few minutes every day and write 3 things you're thankful for. Go on a walk and intentionally think about the beauty of God. Like that's how you talk to yourself instead of letting your thoughts rule the day. And in that, we can take what might be a place of doubt and turn it into a place of faith to experience a miracle. The last place we see Andrew in the Gospel of John is in chapter 12, and it's a really simple story where we see a couple of Greek-speaking people go to another apostle, Philip, and ask to find Jesus. And Philip, well, he goes to Andrew first, which is always kind of an odd detail to me, but what it reminds me of is that, hey, Andrew knew exactly how to find Jesus. And that's what Philip knew. Philip knew that if nothing else, Andrew was available. There was a lot of reasons to be too busy. There was a lot of things going on in his life. But Andrew was never too busy to take one more person to Jesus. He was available. See, this is where I think we find our purpose. This is where I think we live out our purpose. It's not in an aptitude test. It's not in a strength finders quiz. Where we find our purpose is by saying yes to God. I mean, Scripture is full of people who lived out their purpose one yes at a time. We talk about David and being, a giant slayer and being the king of the nation. Well, David's whole purpose started with saying yes to taking a meal to his family. Peter is known for preaching to thousands of people at Pentecost. But Peter's whole purpose started with saying yes to an invitation from Andrew. So we find our purpose by living out our yes one day at a time, by giving our yes to God one moment, one situation, one circumstance at a time. So will you be available? Man, I'm excited to hear, what principles you're living out, maybe what pitfalls you're struggling with, but more importantly, how you're experiencing the purpose God's put in front of you. I can't wait to hear your stories. I can't wait to hear about your conversations and what come out of this time. I love you. I'm thankful for you. We'll see you Sunday.